Hello to you again. Many chess players perhaps might wonder, when they look at a position on the board, what happened before this? And that, of course, is called retrograde analysis. Let me just define, by comparison and contrast, the retrograde analysis and the conventional analysis. Now, with a conventional problem, we set the problem and it's there to be solved. And so long as that position can clearly be seen to have been arrived at through a legal process, in other words, no illegal moves in chess, then that's fine, and we can go on and we can attempt to solve the problem. And generally speaking, it should have a unique key move and be as accurate as possible. Sometimes problems have to be improved, updated, whatever, but most of the time they can be relied upon not to be cooked. In other words, a flaw to be found in them or alternative solutions and so on. You can compare that with the retrograde analysis, that the same rules apply there. The contrast, though, is that with retrograde analysis, the composer, whether they be Vladimir Nabokov, the late Russian, or any one of his ilk, in structuring a retrograde analysis problem, they have already worked out what has gone before, and then they set the position and know how to go back and solve it, and then it's for you to do the same. Now, the conventional problem and the composer of the conventional problem is in no way doing that. And if they are at some future point called upon to say, now, how did that pawn get there, or how did that happen, they might be in a bit of a perplexity as to answer that question. Now, one or two have done that with me, and I have successfully come up with the retrograde analysis. There was no intention on my part to do so. And like I say, unless you're of a Vladimir Nabokov type, you're not going to do that. And what I would do is I would cite and borrow the famous words of Dr. Alexander Alekhine, who once observed, "The past has no relevance. It is only the present position on the board that counts." So what Alekhine is as good as saying here is he doesn't give a damn about what has happened before it. He's interested in the position. Of course, he would agree with what I've just said about retrograde analysis. It's a specialized field, and Nabokov was a genius at it, and many others proved to be equally so. I don't attempt to really construct anything retrograde, although I think I would be capable of doing so. But it can be a very difficult business when you construct conventionally, and then you're called upon what happened before that. Now, the position in front of us, I have already uploaded a short here. This is Paul Morphy's famous problem, and it's the only problem that he ever published. I don't know if it's the only problem he ever composed. If there are any hitherto unpublished problems by Morphy, they'd be worth a fortune, but probably there is none, and I suspect that that is the case. Now, the position in front of you, what I'd say about Paul Morphy is he was a great player, quite possibly the greatest player who ever lived. And as Bobby Fischer asserted, he'd beat anyone today in a set match. That was in the 1960s. And I think he would beat anyone today, including, sorry Magnus, even you, if he were let loose in the 21st century. He was a naturally gifted player, and he knew exactly what to do in any given position. The only time that he was beaten was when he was ill. When he was in good health, I don't think anyone would have come close to him. He was an absolute genius at the game. He was a highly intelligent man. And when he structured this problem in front of you, he would never even have remotely considered that anyone would ask the question, what was Black's last move here? He'd say, well, it's the problem, you solve it if you can, and it's a good one. And the solution is available on another of my problems uploaded, like I say. So just take a look at this problem in front of you, and I'm not trying to diminish this problem. Like I've said, he wouldn't have considered that anyone would ask this question. Well, I'm reappraising the conventional problem and the retrograde problem, and I think Morphy's problem here is a very good example for two reasons. One, it's a good problem, and when you go back, you're thinking, well, this is a great player who composed this. Is he going to be found wanting? Well, unfortunately, I think he is, yes. Just take a good look at this, and you tell me what was Black's last move. Now you can clearly see that it couldn't have been the king, because the king has no square from which it could possibly have moved. It couldn't have been the two pawns, because they are on their original squares. So by implication, it must be this bishop, which must have moved from one of these. Now it wouldn't be this, because otherwise white would have taken the bishop off, quite possibly, and then these pawns would be free to move, so there'd be no question of stalemate. It would have to be here, 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 or here. It wouldn't be here, otherwise the rook would have gone. So let's just say here. Now the question is, in this position, what was white's last move? Well, clearly he's moved this rook from somewhere along here, not from here, because it would already be then to be delivering checkmate. It must be on one of these, not this, because again it would be taken. So one of these other squares that's free from capture. And he's moved it to here. And he's saying to black, I'm threatening rook h7 mate. So that was black's last move, which would you say is fair enough? Well, it defends against rook h7, but it doesn't defend against mate in 2. So let's just put this back for a moment. Is there an alternative move for black in this position? And if so, what is it? Take a good look at that position. White is threatening rook h7, checkmate. Is there an alternative move? Well, I think there is, and I think it's this, h6. Now the question is, how does white make progress here? What I can tell you is there's certainly no mate in 2. He can't do anything with his pawn, it's stuck. If he moves his king out of the way, he's achieving nothing. So by implication, he has to do something else. I mean, if he tries moving his rook to here, for instance, you just move the bishop along. So the only chance that he has is to take on h6, which is the key move in the problem, except he's not taking a pawn in the key move in the problem. And so we would have to take back. And now, like in the problem, he plays g7. The only difference here, and black is winning this game, because white cannot promote that pawn on g7 without losing it. And this pawn cannot be stopped. So that doesn't work. So let's just put this back for a moment. Again, I'm reiterating, I'm not diminishing this problem. I think it's a fine problem, so long as you look at it in the way that it's intended. You know, don't try to be finicky and say, well, what happened before that? You don't need to concern yourself with that unless it's published as retrograde analysis. However, if the composition lends itself to being able to come up with some retrograde, as one or two of mine have, then that's fine as well, but often it's not the case. So in this position after h6, what does white have as an alternative here? You tell me that. Well, if he tries coming back this way, for instance, then we can do this. Then if the king moves out the way, we can just go back somewhere. And if he comes down here, like that, then we can just go back. And you notice that in this position, white cannot get his king into a position where he can deliver checkmate there. He just can't do it, because he can't play it to f7. In spite of black's bishop being pinned, white would be putting himself in check, and if he put his king here, he'd be blocking it. So what does he do in that position? Well, okay, he plays for time. That's all right. So only move is here, yeah? So what about this? Well, okay, what about this? If he goes back, we go back. He takes it. So what do we play now? What we play now is this. And if he takes here, stalemate. I think white would be able to win this game. There are alternative moves here if you check them out. But what I'm saying is, he didn't have to play bishop g8, and there was no mate in 2. Now that is considerable food for thought. I don't know whether any top flight players have ever considered looking at any problems like this, or this particular problem, but I think the Paul Morphy problem is a very good example, because it's composed by a great player who in no way is being diminished by this video. What I'm saying is there's a big difference between conventional problem composing and retrograde problem composing, and this is proof positive of that. I hope you enjoyed this, and it settles the question once and for all, the difference between the two types, and goodbye for now.